Welcome back, team. Next stage of upgrades for the World Raid continues. I'm getting it closer towards the ultimate setup, travel setup for me. You know, you've seen in the previous episodes I've trimmed down a lot of weight from the back end and just getting a feel for the big girl and make the thing perform at its best once it's fully loaded. That's the biggest problem with adventure bike riders, is they're so excited to live this image of adventure and they destroy the handling of their bikes with the luggage they put on it. So I've got the Touratech Pro set here, which is designed around, as they call it, you know, expedition use. Progressive spring rates increase the closer it gets to the bottom of the stroke, and what that allows is, you know, an overall better supported load. So you're still running your ride height up in the stroke, but it's sort of supple at the top where you want to float over the corrugations and the little rocks and things. And then when you take a big hit, ooh, down the bottom, there's more resistance to that metal to metal clunk happening. I'll run you through, you know, some more of the concept behind this stuff as I throw it in. But yeah, let's get into it. Once again, guys, if you like this stuff, like and share this video, hit the subscribe button. Just visually, there's a huge difference between these two shocks just in terms of the size, and I'll show you exactly what that is now. Start with the spring. 11mm coil versus 12mm coil on the Touratech. 14mm shock shaft on the standard versus 16mm shock shaft. The big difference there in terms of oil capacity and piston size. The bigger the piston, the bigger the shaft has to be to force it through the oil, right? So the shock body on the standard is 46.5mm versus, wow, 52. Let's just forget the action of it all. If you're pounding corrugations on a, you know, outback road, the standard shock's going to heat up a lot faster and cook the oil inside a lot easier than the bigger shock body. Now just quickly eye this up too. Tradesman's eye, they're bang on in length, so you know, we're not messing with the geometry here, we're purely reinforcing the shock action. Now, of all those things, from the load bearing capacity through the size of the spring and the shock body, the oil volume, all that aside, this right here is the reason I've gone for this aftermarket shock. High speed and low speed compression. Low speed and high speed is what it sounds like. So low speed ultimately sets the feel of the ride, right? So when you mess with your low speed dial, you're sort of controlling the resistance of oil as it's just, you know, cruising around the road, rolling through the hills. With high speed compression, that comes into play depending on what you've hit. High speed really comes into effect when you start hitting those square edges, those big high speed impacts, anything that's going to force the shock. If you've just got low speed, like pretty much every conventional shock, you are limited to that valving to work over the whole spectrum. When the shock can't keep up with the rate of compression, it effectively hydraulics the oil and starts pushing the whole motorcycle up. So your back end's just going to go, oh, that's too fast, boom. What happens is, with high speed compression, when that oil rate is flowing faster than the low speed can handle it, it literally dumps that circuit, bypasses that oil now through a high speed circuit, which allows, like a pressure relief, a secondary element of control to go, all right, we're dealing with this pace of oil flow now. And in redirecting that circuit, it's got another configuration to control the oil at a different rate through a different gallery of holes. So, you know, cruising around the road, your shock piston's going inside the body at this rate and it's all good, squelching through the oil, this is great, boom, hits a curb or a pothole. Ugh. Instead of just hydraulicking and kicking the back end of the bike up in the air, it bypasses through the high speed circuit and allows the shock to move much faster without just deleting all the damping. It's now switched over to a high speed circuit, and you know, all set. Touratech shocks in. This preload adjuster here, it's a completely separate system to the shock, so it's got nothing to do with the hydraulics of the shock. All it is like a little jack that alters the preload of your spring. Pretty cool if you're swapping between taking your luggage off and just riding without it, and then putting your luggage on. Having this dial is awesome to just set your preload and counteract the load. So actually I'll just mention, Touratech supply this funky little bracket, and they've designed it to be mounted under the exhaust thing here. Again, you know what I'm like, I don't want to add extra weight, so I've left that off and I've gone lower and more forward, closer to the mass, and it's tucked away nicely. It's on the exact plane of this side plate. And just looking at the boot, yeah, it's never going to bother me. If I take all my weight off the bike and crank this up, you'll probably see the rear end lift. But if you can imagine all that luggage on there, that'll weigh that back down to a nice static sag, and it'll be at its perfect ride height. Wow, rear shock is pretty impressive. The shock's at another level. Whoa, here we go, downhill kickers. This is gonna test her. Yeah, super safe. You know, I'm fairly charging this downhill. Oh, we got the ugly ruts coming up this side. Let's just destroy them. Did you see the big unit? Just keep that together. The rear end's just hit the back wall of that rut, and the low speed just couldn't deal with it, and the high speed has taken enough off the edge of that hit for the bike to stay composed. Guaranteed standard shock would have just bucked me straight over the bars. Fuck. This is good. The shock's bloody good. Wow. Far out, it just takes it. Let's wind up for the Matterhorn, shall we? Deep stroke kicker here, under brakes. Yeah, that would have normally booted the bike in the ass. Yeah, that progressive spring at the front has just matched this fork to the rear. The rear is so capable and the front is holding its own. Awesome. Nailed it. That was a bit of a boss move, to be honest. Wow, awesome. Mate, this thing's ready to race. Not that I plan to. This thing has some pure dirt bike performance now, and that works in your favor when you're traveling through unknown terrain. The situations I've put this in now, I understand its capabilities completely. So as I start loading this up with luggage, I can dial back the scenarios, but also feel it out in confidence. Let's face it, there's so many perils out there when you're traveling, and I know a lot of you that don't claim to be that good a rider, you're still sitting on 120 on dirt roads out in the middle of nowhere just because they'll do it, right? And they'll do it all day. But when the time comes that a big erosion ditch from, you know, floods or whatever just appears, you want to know that, you know, your bike has some performance underneath it to deal with some big hits, some sketchy moments. And that's why I do all of this. Not to go racing, not to just carry. I like doing this, right? I love jumping logs and mucking around. But I'm also showcasing the performance of Yamaha's bike. Let's face it, this is their bike. But I don't want to break it either. Everything I do with, you know, that calculated risk, as you call it. And, you know, I want to know that what I've done has effect. And I can confidently translate that to you guys to see that this is no bullshit here, you know. I've seen so many people out there that have spent so much money on all the wrong things. And they just because they don't know any different. And some, you know, dealerships are just rubbing their hands together. If I can do anything with all of this, I really want to try and educate people on getting their bikes set up properly and stop buying garbage and focus on the right things. And it all just comes down to the riding experience, because that's why we're doing it, right? I've seen so many people out in the world. I remember in Moto Nomad 2 crossing Mongolia. And we're on the 500 EXCs, you know, race ready, all the camping gear we needed, living on the bikes, right, all the way across Mongolia. And I come across these two GS riders, and they were like, they had luggage up past their shoulders. It was ridiculous. And I thought, you guys are having a shit time. And you are going so slowly. Honestly, each to their own. Some people are never going to go off-road. They're never going to leave, you know, the tarmac. They want these bikes. And that's great because the manufacturers are thriving. However, help yourself. Set the bike up properly. Anyway, moving right along. Rear shock, game changer. You know, the standard shock was pretty bloody good for everyone. Even if you never touched anything, you could up the spring rate of the standard rear, put some luggage on, and you'll be fine for riding around the world. But if you're a bigger guy, you got some luggage on and you travel at pace, the shock upgrade is the high speed, low speed damping. You saw all those situations, you know. Once again, guys, if you like this stuff, like and share this video, hit the subscribe button. And moving right along, the evolution of this World Raid, it's just becoming more epic with every video. And now I'm going to start going down into the motor. I need to get a bash plate Acro are threatening me with a full rally system, exhaust like Poltara spec, but we'll see if that shows up. In the meantime, the slip-on muffler's mint. I've still got the cat in there. I'd like to get rid of that because there's some weight there. And yeah, see you next time.